So,
Yeah.
fire away.
I was just so starting out. You were born in Wales.
I was born in southeast Wales, which is the town was called Newport,
Newport. Okay.
South Wales, and I was born on a housing estate just outside Newport, on the edge of the countryside, and in a place called Maesglas, which, as I said, was in English field blue.
Field blue.
And then I went to the infant school and eventually to the senior school, where I played football for them, and I played football for a team, Maesglas United.
I see. So, how's your family growing up? How were your mom and dad? Because from what I've heard from other stories.
My father, he worked on the Newport docks, what they call a wharfinger. And they looked after, when the ships come in, they checked all the material coming in and that. And then later on, when the war came, he used to be a part-time fireman, and he was promoted to chief superintendent of Newport Docks Fire Service in the war.
So this was happening in World War II, while the Blitz was happening and the Germans were bombing.
Yes. And he had the accommodation. The ship came in, and it had been hit, and it was full of petrol. And they had to go in 10 minutes at a time, mask, to pump it out. And he had a commendation from Winston Churchill.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
And he also fought other fires in the town as well. And then he was promoted then to in charge of all the operations on the dock, of moving stuff about, unloading ships. They used to have the cranes to offload, and then I worked for a firm who had what they call a drot. I don't know if you know what a drot is.
No, I don't.
It's a track machine with a shovel on the front of it.
Okay. And
the operator would load, and they put those down in the hold of the ship to push the iron ore to the centre.
Wow. And
then the crane could grab it and offload. My mother, she worked for a very well-off family who owned 10 farms.
Wow.
And she used to be housekeeper for them. And we never went short of eggs or stuff during the war.
That was quite something, wasn't it?
Yes,
during the war.
We were quite well fed, really. We had we didn't have too much bombing. We had a lot of incendiary bombs. A couple of the houses were hit, but the Germans seemed to shoot what they were doing, and a lot of it dropped in the River Ebro. The bombs went in there.
In where? Sorry?
In the river.
Oh, the river. Oh, really?
River Ebro, it was called. And we had one landmine which landed about 500 yards away from us.
Wow.
And we were on the landing because the air raid siren had gone. And the house
really?
sort of lifted up and dropped. And then we went down to the shelter then.
Oh, wow.
But my eldest brother, he would never get out of bed. He said, if they're going to kill me, they can kill me in my bed.
Wow, that's some nerves of steel.
Yeah.
Wow.
And then we had the troops coming through our street to the docks to go and fight in France, and we used to collect their badges off them. And then when Dunkirk happened, the wounded came back through our streets as well to be taken through. And my mother, her two brothers, they would come through as well, but they weren't wounded. They had all their gear, their rifles, their helmets dented.
Wow.
And then a bit later on then in the war, we had the Americans came, and they had a gun battery on what we called a tip. They had an anti-aircraft gun and a machine gun. And behind us in the countryside, there was British ack guns for the planes.
Okay.
And they had what they call a barrage balloon. This was on a huge thick rope and went way up. It was like a blown up thing.
Okay.
And when if German planes come in, it would cut the wings off the plane, like,
Oh, really?
if they hit it.
Wow.
And we had one plane which they shot down and landed on top of a house about roughly a mile away, killed the people inside, and they captured the pilot.
Was he still alive?
Yeah, he was still alive.
Wow.
And they had a prisoner of war camp about 2 miles behind us in the countryside with Germans and Italians. And the priest in the village, he wasn't, the people didn't like him a lot because he used to invite the Italian prisoners to the feed him. And he wasn't very popular. The Catholic priest wasn't. Most of us were Protestants.
I see.
And they were there then, and more or less until the end of the war. In actual fact, the camp is still there now, today.
Oh, wow.
The buildings. And then you had the Americans, and we had thousands of them ready for D-Day.
Yeah.
And they were stationed up on the hillside and had all their vehicles in the roads. And we used to go, and they liked chips. Chips and sausages and things like that. So we used to go and get the chips and sausages and take back to them. And they used to give us a few dollars. But they always asked, have you got a sister? And they had silk stockings and makeup and whatever. It was quite comical. And then eventually, after I worked for so long, from 14 and a half to 18, I was enlisted in the army. And as I said before, I went to Aldershot, and the 2 weeks you learnt. First week was all about the corps you were in, what they did and how long they had been established. The second week they taught you the paperwork and how to distribute the goods. And you had your exam, and then we moved then for 2 weeks military training, then learning how to strip Bren guns and oil them and the rifles, and then you go out on target practice, firing at the targets. And then we would go back to the barracks, and they would have an inspection then of all your kit, and you had to fold your blankets had to be folded in a square with the one blanket around them, so you had like a box, and you had to put that at the head of your bed. And then the officer and the sergeant and the corporal would come along and inspect the air, it was clean, and if it wasn't, he would flick it with his stick and tell the sergeant, throw it out the window and make him do it again. And they had to do it again.
Oh my God.
And then in the morning, sometimes the corporals who were training you on the marching and rifle drill and all, 5 o'clock in the morning they would bring the horse pipe in and get you out of bed.
Oh my God.
And you used to have fun, some fun like you, and you would do the necessary marching and all that. And then at the end of the 10 weeks, they would then bring you in and tell you which area you were going to be stationed. Some stayed in England, some went to Eritrea, I went to Germany. And we landed in a place called Minden. Then we moved from Minden to Oldenburg, and from Oldenburg to Hamburg, where I was permanent. And we were stationed outside Hamburg in a place called Wonsbeck. And there you were given your job in the stores, whichever type of stores you wanted to. And then eventually I was put into the ration stores. So in the ration stores, you had Germans working for you. I had a German driver. I was promoted and I had a German driver to take me 5 o'clock in the morning and go and pick up the bread rations and the rolls and go back, and we'd start putting that up for the officers' mess, sergeants' mess and the other ranks, and for the married families. Then we would go out then and we would pick up all the other things, vegetables, meat, butter, everything, take that back and do the same again, put it for the officers' mess, sergeants' mess, other ranks, then put it up the married families.
Mm-hmm.
And then Hans and I, we would go then, we would load the lorry and take all the food to the families around the area. And then we would come back to the barracks. But Hans had been bullied a bit by the military police when he came back from the war.
Was he was German, I'm thinking.
Yeah,
Hans.
he was a German. And he was on the Russian front and he got shot through the shoulder.
Oh, so he was also a World War II veteran.
Yeah, and through the knee.
Oh, wow.
And he used to limp, but he was a good driver. But he didn't like the military police, because when he came back, the military police, they were after the SS. And he was a big man. And they'd strip him and check if they had any SS tattoo under here. And he was really afraid of him. And then when we used to come back from the married families, there was a German patrol. They were dressed similar to the our military police, but they had yellow tops and they had a brown uniform. And they would stop the traffic, and I would tell him, you know, stop. I must stop. I'm boss, you keep going. And I'd go and carry on till we got back. And then when we got back then, I would have to do different chores in the ration stores, and then we were free in the evening. We would go, we had a naffy. The naffy was a place where you could buy drinks and food.
I see.
And eventually we started where we used to go out to the German pubs and drink. And we had one pub we used regular, and we had that as our mess. All the corporals and sergeants would go there. We'd take our own bottles of whiskey and what have you, and we would have a night drinking there. And then the one time we went to another barracks, which was the Airborne, and I was with a friend of mine. His name was Kennedy, and he was from Manchester. And we went in, they had a dancer. I never danced, I was just sit and drink. Kennedy used to dance, and this day he was dancing, and this loudmouth Airborne troop come in. Who's the best man before I came in? and he tapped Kenny on the shoulder to excuse me dance. And Kenny said, "This is not an excuse me dance, you'll have to wait." And he said something to Kenny, and Kenny hit him and knocked him out. And then we had to run. Ran off from the street with them chasing us.
Oh my God. So the violence was not ended after World War II.
Oh, it was just quite funny, really.
And
then every so often you would have to go on what they called a confidence course, and you had to climb trees and go across ropes and down, and then you had to climb up a very high tree, up a rope ladder, and they had a platform, and what we called the death slide was a huge cable, and you fitted a pulley on, and then you swung out and went down. And when you reached the bottom, you had to be quick and let go and roll away from the wire.
Oh my God, wow.
Or you'd chop you in half.
Oh my God. Ooh.
And then they took us in, you had to go on a quarter of a mile running all the way. And this was in the winter. And they had the huge bomb craters, was full of water, had frozen over, and they had logs going across there. And you had a full kit, big pack, pouches with ammunition and your rifle, and you run across, and then you carry on, and you get the next obstacle, go over that. Then you had the wall, where two of you threw him up, and then he straddled the wall and lifted you up until they'd all gone over. And you carry on running in, then you had to swing across the water on a rope. You had to jump out for the rope and swing and make sure you didn't fall in. Then you had a tube going under the water and out the other side, and you had to crawl through that, and your pack used to get caught. And you had to wrap your rifle so it didn't get dirty, because
okay.
When you got out of there, then the final run was target practice.
Oh my God.
You lay down, and I did every now and again a target of a man would pop up, and you had to fire at it. And you had that every so often. And when I became, because I was NCO, I had to go to another barracks.
So NCO is non-commissioned officer?
Non-commissioned officer, yeah. I had to go to another barracks then, and we would be doing educational work and work about the army, and again training, rifle training, marching in the snow, out on parade in the snow, marching. But we had absolutely brilliant quarters. It was a huge mansion which the army had taken over, and we had proper beds and proper toilets. And we had, when we went for our food, we had tablecloths and Fräulein serving us with our food. It was very, very good. And we had a sergeant, what they call a SQMS, which is a squadron sergeant major,
okay,
who was out of the Lancers. And he had a little dog, and he would have the dog doing different tricks, and then he would put a coin down on the floor, and he'd say to the dog, "Mind." And then he said to you, "Go and pick it up." And you're going to go down it. And I met him again then. When I finished with the army, I had to do another 6 months. I had to do 2 years instead of 18 months because of the war in Korea.
Oh, okay.
So we had to stay on. But when I finished then, I had to do 5 years on a reserve.
I see.
So I used to have to, every year I had to report to a barracks in England, and then I was the instructor on drill, and we would compete against one another, and I won a cup with my squad, and I won a cup on the tug of war with my squad. They were very good squad.
Now, I have a question here. What are some conclusions or some lessons that you've learned from the military? I mean, something that, really stuck with you for the past years of your
mainly discipline. I would still think I was in the army. I would do everything like I did in the army. Discipline to do it. And I disciplined my children the same.
Oh, really?
Yes. They done what I told them to do, or else.
So they were all...
And, yes. And of course, you learn to respect other people and expect respect back from them. Because in Germany, apart from the young children, well, not young children, boys your age, who had served in the Hitler Youth, we had lots of problems with them. We would throw them off the trams when they started their nonsense, but the older people were very good. They said they didn't know about concentration camps, but obviously they did. But they were afraid to do anything because, like, say you was just a family and you was in the Hitler Youth, if your mother or father done something wrong, you would report them. And they could go to prison or go to concentration camp. They were that much indoctrinated. Another thing I learned to do after I came out was to drive, because I could drive there without a license, because we were stationed on the Hamburg-Lübeck Autobahn, and that was ours. We had all our tanks, lorries, everything on there, which we were in charge of. And you would have to go on guard in the night, because they used to come down and steal bits off the vehicles.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
And another thing I did do, I had to go with 6 men armed to the teeth. They had rifles, Sten guns, and we had to escort the Centurion tanks from Hamburg to another city, and every so often you had to stop and be shunted into the sidings because they were so wide to allow the express trains to go through. And then as soon as you stopped, you sent them out and they had to go around all the tanks, keep going around until we moved again. And then we would, once we handed them over, then we got on a train and we'd come back to the barracks. But I did once unload one off a low loader. It's like, because when I went to work then, when I finished in the clothing industry, I went to work in a brickworks, and then when I finished I was 12 stone 8 when I went in the brickworks, and when I come out I was 7 stone 11. It was hot, hard work.
Oh,
and then I went then, from there I injured my back. I was helping one of the boys out to do something and I pulled a disc, and then I had to finish, and then I went to work in a bakery near where I lived, and eventually I went with McAlpine's, a big construction firm who built the Steelworks in Lanwern in Newport.
So this was after your military service. This was
Yes, after my
in the
military
later
service.
years. I see.
And this was the most modern steelworks they had. Everything come in this end, and it went right through the process and went out that end as a steel coil.
Mm-hmm.
What else did we do there? And then I was working with the main contractor. When the job finished with the building, I went with the main contractor to the steelworks, and we supplied all the plant, cranes, drots, bulldozers, every machine you like, we supplied it to the various departments. And then we would have to go and make sure that everything was all right. We used to have to go into the blast furnaces and everything. And one time in the blast furnace, there was in the steel plant rather, there was an accident, and they tipping the metal into huge containers, and something happened, and the metal, it was 49 foot up, hit the deck and went over, and about 7 or 8 men were killed. The metal went down on them, and they couldn't get out. And another very dangerous place was the blast furnace. Now the gas in the blast furnace, you couldn't smell it.
Yeah.
All you would know that there was something wrong when you seen somebody go bump and hit the floor. Then they would send in men with breathing equipment and pull them out and take them to their surgery, and keep them there until they were all right, and then let them out again. And they weren't supposed to smoke for a couple of days, and you would have one idiot who wanted to smoke, and he'd smoke, and he'd make himself worse, and he had to go back in there and stay there.
So it was back then, there weren't that many safety norms, were there?
Well, when I eventually then, the British Steel bought our firm out, and I worked for British Steel for 32 years then, and we were responsible. I was what they call a shift manager, responsible for distributing men and machines to various jobs and going into the furnaces and that. And we had to wear a special suit, which was like a wool, but if metal splashed it, it would just stick, it wouldn't burn you, it wouldn't go through. And of course you had the helmet, and we had to visit every department on the site. And one day we were there, and they put the ingot up, and they smashed that down to a slab, and the slab came off the furnace and went through the paint shop. Boof. Then I eventually then retired after 32 years. I was 65.
Wow.
And I had a lump sum and a pension. And of course then I had an old age pension as well. So I had the 2 pensions. And I also took out a separate pension which paid me every 12 months. I would get a lump sum. But the tax man used to take a lot.
Oh God, the tax man.
But you learned as you go along. You learn, to be friendly with people. That was a very main, because at the times there were a lot of people who were going around causing problems, and you had to learn to respect other people and their ways. And where we always had fun was when Wales played England rugby.
I can tell why you had fun.
If we won, It was great. If you lost, it was not so great. And we played, they called it the Six Nations. At the time, it was the Five Nations. It was England, Scotland, Ireland, Wales, and France. And then they brought in Italy and made it Six Nations. And they all played for the cup. And then you had, of course, you had the World Cup as well. And then you had the All Blacks and the big teams who come into it. The other thing we had was when the war finished, the big celebration. Everybody in the street drinking and eating, but there was a very bad part because the troops who fought the Japanese in Burma and that, and the Japanese were very, very cruel to them. They called it the Forgotten Army because they didn't celebrate when the war finished. They were just left to come home, and many of them had mental troubles when they come home. My uncle, he was wounded in Singapore, and he died of blackwater fever, which is a very bad malaria.
I see.
And it usually kills you. And the boy who lived next door was with him and nursed him, and then come back and told my mother what had happened to her brother. And,
that must be horrible to go
and
through.
I had about five uncles who was in the war. My eldest brother, he couldn't go because he was on the railway, and they wouldn't allow them to go. They had to stay on the railway. And my next brother, he served in the Royal Navy. And then when he was old enough, my younger brother, he joined the army as well, and he done 5 years in the army. And he ended up stationed in, where was it he was? Where all the trouble was, in Malaysia, I think it was. Somewhere where there was a lot of trouble.
I see. How many brothers did you have? So you had your oldest,
I had the oldest, then the next one to him, there was 3 years difference.
Mm-hmm.
Then me, there was 3 years difference. And then the younger one, there was 9 years difference between me and him.
I see. So there was
4 boys.
4 boys.
No girls, all boys. And when I got married, I had a son and 4 girls. And my younger brother, he had a son and 4 girls.
Oh, really? What was something, back then, from your entire military career, your service, and even the later years, and when you worked in the steel factories and everything, what's something that left a big impact on you? Something that, just still...
The biggest impact on me in the steel industry.
And in the military as well, your careers as well, in general.
In the military, of course, was discipline, and that you had to be disciplined. You had to do what you was told, and do it when you were told. And it taught you in life to appreciate when you went to work. You had a job, and you were told to do something, you've done it. And with the steel industry, I think the greatest thing there what it really you was to learn safety. You had to be on your toes all the time. You had to be very careful where you went and what you done, because there were some parts which were very highly dangerous. From where they made the coke ovens, they had a material that came off there that if you dropped, say, for instance, a lump of meat in it, would gone, burnt, sizzled away.
Really?
And we used to have to escort this in a container and take it up onto a tip where they poured it out over the top until it settled. and became less dangerous.
I see.
But at the time it was highly dangerous. And if you walked into places like the blast furnaces or the steel plant, there was always something going on around you. And in the rolling mills was the same. You had cranes going over your head with carrying coils.
Oh
In the steel plant you had cranes going over, and you had operators. They had huge containers which had the metal in them, and had poured it out and had gone. And then they had a man on a machine with like a drill, a track machine, and then he would drill all the hard stuff from around the neck of it, clean it out. And he would be 9 foot. Yes, he would be on the 9 foot level, and the drop, because they brought the thing towards him on a crane and held it there, and if he went too far, he'd go right over the side. There was no barrier.
Oh my God. Yeah,
But
so it was...
The main thing I think you learn in life is to respect other people's wishes and to make friends and get on with life, you know, and decide what you want to do with your life and do it at the best
of your capacity. Yeah.
And it was, at one time it was a fairly hard life, but when you got used to it, with all the things you went to, from the clothing firm to the military, and then from there on, you learned your lessons as you went along. You learned to understand things, and you learned to do things at your very best. But it was a fairly good life. I think I have lived through the best years, you know. It's only now, since that we've had all these things happening in our life, like the pandemic and the war and that. I mean, the Korean War and the Vietnam War, really, that was fought away. You didn't, and also the one for the Falkland Islands. Now, a lot of Welsh troops got killed there on a boat. Instead of offloading them,
they were kept
overnight.
And the planes would drop
come in and
rockets,
rocket it. And the one is still famous now. He does a lot of broadcasting, and he had his face burnt and that. But he's pretty good condition now to what he was, and he's a very good talker, and he goes on different journeys like around and telling the tales.
If you could have chosen a different path in your life, would you have chosen something else? Was there something that, you know...
The only other thing think I would have done if I had the education and that, was to go into like engineering or into plumbing, into something like that, which I could have then gone into my own business and done my own thing. That is the only thing I ever regret. And I just didn't have the know-how as far as the engineering side of it was concerned. Didn't have the brains for it.
You did mention you were in school, you liked maths and history.
Yes, I like maths and history. I used to read books on history even after I finished school. And I was very good at counting money and that. But we had when I first married, we had a fairly hard life, because you couldn't get a house. You had to rent somewhere, and the money wasn't really good in the clothing industry. It wasn't until I went into the brickworks where I earned 3 times as much as I did in the.
Wow.
I had £7 a week in the clothing.
£7 a week.
Yeah, and £23 in the brickworks.
Wow.
And when I was married, and after I came out of the army, I was married. I married, and then when I was on training then, as a sergeant, I would get £7 a week marriage allowance. The money to start off wasn't very good until I got into the steel industry, the building of the steelworks and the steelworks itself. And then the money I earned, when I was finishing, I was earning £23,000 a year, which was good. You could really, do things then. That was the first time when they started going on holiday. I couldn't afford to go on holiday before.
Wow.
Our parents, because I had relatives who lived in Porthcawl, which was a seaside area, and we had another place called Barry Island, which the miners used to go on their holidays with the buses. You could afford to go there. You could go on a bus trip to there, and when Porthcawl, we used to catch the train, and during the war I stayed in Porthcawl for 6 or 8 weeks and went to school there because of the bombers. And it was, all in all, I've had a good life. I haven't had really hard times. I've never been poor, I've always had money. Not a lot of money sometimes, but money nevertheless to be able to get by and buy food and go out and have a drink now and again. But once I went into the steel industry, I could start to go on holidays then. I could afford to go to Spain or whatever. And then when I retired, and I was married to Iris then. When we just got married, we hadn't been married long, and I had a lump sum, so I paid for part of Iris's family and part of my family and took them to America, to Disney World.
To Disney World?
Yeah.
How was it back then? How was Disney World back then?
Oh, it was really good.
Really?
Yeah. And because we had the children with us, but they really were too young.
Oh, I see.
I think to go to Disney World, you need to be at least around about 7 or 8.
Yeah, to actually get to notice what's going on.
What's going on.
Yeah.
And they enjoyed it, and of course you could buy lots of things for them. And we stayed in a huge house, and Iris and I had the best part. We had our own quarters with our own shower and everything, and the others shared what they had. But we went to America a few times because Iris's nephew lived in America. They were born there. Iris's sister-in-law, she married an American, and then she divorced him, and then she married a Italian American, and they had a huge house, and the boys as well. And the boys, when they came over to Iris's on holiday, they had never seen coal. And they used to go in the coal house with the coal covered black. But we stayed with them, and they took us everywhere. The one, he was a big top man. First of all, he worked for Ferrari, and his boss would say, "You have a case packed, ready." And he'd come and say, "Right, we're flying to Italy." And he'd say, "I leave you here now, I'm flying back, you sort out the business, and then you get Concorde and come back. And he'd land, they wait for him and take him to work. The only time he had off was Saturday and Sunday. The rest of the time, work until late in the evening.
Wow.
But he was very, he in the end, he became a real top dog. He was in lights, advertising in New York.
Really? And
then eventually he moved to around Texas way, around that way. I can't understand him, but he moved to a place where it was very, very hot.
And I don't like the heat. I cannot stand the heat.
Yeah, very hot it was. The other brother, he was a whiz kid, he worked for a bank, and he used to sell the houses, sell the properties, you know. And his first year, his bonus was 600, what is it? No, £6,000.
6,000?
Bonus.
Wow. No, if you could tell something to the younger generation regarding career paths and purpose finding, what would finding their purpose and finding what they would like to do in career, because I think you managed to find some things for yourself.
Yeah, I would tell them to study when they're in school, do their work, not to play about, to really study.
To be disciplined, to have the discipline too.
Yes, and when they came out from school, make up their mind what they were going to go for. And don't let anybody dissuade them. If they wanted to go to that certain job, to go there and to really get on. If they went in the forces, I told them that they must go for promotion. Don't listen to anybody else, because what happens when you're in the forces and you're with all of the men, and they say, oh, you're going to get promoted, and you won't have nothing to do with us now, you will have your different friends. But you had more money. So I told them, go all out. Now my son, he went into the Merchant Navy, and he was on the liners, the big liners, travelling all around the world. And I told him, whatever he'd done, to do the job properly and be disciplined.
Because you don't know what opportunities are going to come.
He wasn't very good at the discipline. When we come to meet him now in Southampton to pick him up, me and his mother, she said, I can't see him. I said, there he is, there, look. I said, he got a hair down to you.
Oh, wow.
Now, he was supposed to go back, but he wouldn't go back because they were all told that they had to have their hair cut like you, short. And he wouldn't go. So then he went into trainee manager in the like the pubs have done food as well. They had these big places where they had food, and they had a bar there, but mainly it was food. And he was assistant manager in there, and his wife was in charge of the food section. He was in charge of the bar and all that. Then eventually he came back, and I got him a job then in the Steelworks, which he didn't like.
I can imagine why.
Too much discipline again. And I got my son-in-law a job in there, and he didn't stick it. He went out from it. But my son, then he went with the main contractors, and he learned how to operate. He drove 50-ton dump trucks and 10-ton loading shovels that pick up 10 ton to load the lorries. He learned to operate our those. So it done him a bit of good. And then eventually he went into, he went back to college, and he trained as a lawyer, and he passed his O-levels, but then he couldn't afford to stop work then and go for his A-levels, so he knocked that on the head.
Oh.
And he went to work elsewhere then, different jobs. But he seemed to do all right for himself.
So I can tell everybody, at least from what you told me, all these people, you've went through 50 different career paths, like all these kinds of different things. Yeah. Because, sometimes I just, people expect you to just, finish school, finish this, and then just have this one thing that you want to do for the rest of your life. But what if, that happens and you don't necessarily want to do it anymore? You should be able to change.
Yes. Well, my eldest daughter, she had various jobs, and then she eventually went with a firm, a big firm that made metal containers, and they distributed all over the world. And she became a manager then with them. And the other daughter, she worked in a shop, and then the youngest daughter, she was a hairdresser, and then she went to work for the passport office, and she went up the ladder in the passport office. She had a team then of 30 people when they were installing new computers and telephones. And then when that was finished, she went then on the border, to do with the border control.
I see.
And she met a partner now, and he also worked there as well. And that's what they are at the moment. But she had a very bad reaction of the COVID. She had got what we call long COVID. And she had to go to hospitals and treatment. She's not right yet with the lungs and that, and the heart. It affected her. But she's back in work now. She's working from home, and she goes into London as well at work. And they do a bit of travelling. They've been around various places. They just come back now off a cruise in the Norwegian fjords.
Oh, in the Norwegian fjords, right?
Yeah.
Wow.
And they're all settled now, doing their own thing. My son is retired, of course, because he's 67 and he's a pensioner now. My daughter, she is coming up to retirement, and she will get a pension in another 12 months.
I see.
But she also gets pension from the firm, so she's all right. The other one, she's just married, and they're more or less both retired now. Although she does go to, she does school meals. She goes to the school serving the meals to the children. She's still doing that. And her husband, he had to retire because he had a bad injury, and he just had to retire. He was lucky he didn't get killed. He was I got him a job in the steel industry, and he worked on the rail section. And what they used to do, they used to come in and relieve the crew who were working on the job. Well, they're supposed to dress up in that suit I was telling him.
Yeah.
And this day he came in early and he went and relieved them. And what you had a mould with a hot metal inside it, and what we used to call sausages. They put it up around the rim. And this day they were going into the steel plant, and the mould touched the platform, and the steel shot out and hit him hit him in his legs. They grabbed him then, and because inside the steelwork they had all cold showers, throw them straight in there if they were hit by anything. And he survived it and carried on working then until the job finished, like. But he's doing all right because he had pension, of course, and he had a lump sum, although he shouldn't have. They made out, all the men got his suit and threw it into the hot metal and burned it and said that's what happened to his suit when he had it on, but it had caught his legs as well. So they got away with it. And he's got an allotment now. He does a lot of gardening, growing his own vegetables and what have you.
I see.
That was just another thing we used to do when we were young. We used to go, during the war, we used to go out in the fields with a big tent, because we didn't have far to go into the countryside. And it was a big tent, and in the night then we would go around these allotments, raiding and pinching the carrots.
So you were the ones, that it was not animals, it was still, no, it was you. It was you guys.
Pinching the carrots we would.
If you could talk to your younger self right now, to your younger, maybe you in the military, maybe you in the steelworks, or maybe you as a child, what would you tell him? If you had something to tell him?
If I was in the steelworks and had what?
If you could talk to your younger self.
Oh, to my younger self?
Yes.
I would tell myself I'd been an idiot and hadn't concentrated more and like I said, got a profession where you could be your own boss in the end.
So that's something that you would have liked to do,
Yeah.
Start a business of some sort.
Yeah, I think that is, most young people, if they can get into a profession and they're really good at it, then they can get the position where they can be their own boss. It's like the electrician who comes here.
Yeah.
He's got his own business now. He doesn't have to rely on anybody. He gets contracts, quite good contracts, and he's got a team of men working for him on the contracts. And I would advise any young person, if they can get into a business where they can eventually take their own business and improve themselves. Because
that's something that's...
There's a lot of people who do it, a lot of young people back home who have never been highly educated, in the 50s and 60s, and they went hairdressing and built a firm, built a big firm of hairdressers. They went into making clothes and became very famous for the different types and styles of clothes they made. We had young ones then who went into engineering and stuff like that, and especially plumbing, because everybody wants a plumber.
That's true, yeah.
So they went into the plumbing business, and then they built a firm up on their own, and they had their own business.
That is something, that I've noticed, and to some extent that's something that I want to do myself, to find some sort of career or do things, so that I can be my own person, my own boss to some extent. Yeah. Because, just seeing the 9-to-5 jobs, the mediocre ones, there's so many people, who live from 9 to 5, they just go to this job they don't even enjoy, and they go to it for 30 years or something, and they hate it. And
well, when I was in the steel industry, I was what they call a shift manager. So you would work 3 shifts. You would 2 mornings, 2 afternoons, and 3 nights, and then 2 off. Then you would work around until you had Friday, Saturday, Sunday off.
Mm-hmm.
And then they dropped it down to 7-hour shift or something, and then you still had to work the full shift, but you got extra time off. You built the extra time off, so you could end up having, say, on top of your holidays, you could have another week on top of it.
Oh wow.
And it was good, that was. What else do we...
No.
Oh, well, another thing we had to do when we were young, once we'd gone to the senior school, and from then until you finished school, once a week you had to go to learn to swim.
Oh really? You
Yeah.
had to?
Yeah, with the school.
Oh really?
You take the whole class and you go to swimming lessons. And because you played football for the school, once a week you would play another school football. Besides, like I played football for another team as well. And
this was soccer. You mean soccer?
What do you call
Yeah.
soccer,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. Football. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And I finished playing for the Mice class team, and I got transferred to a team what they call Malpas United, and that cost 2 and 6 pence, 2 shillings and 6 pence
Really?
transfer fee.
Oh wow.
I didn't get anything. This was life in general was what do you make of it, you know. It's no good moping about, and you've got to keep going. It's the same now. I still go gardening. I do as much gardening as I can. Although I just say, you know, do this. And then she's out there doing it as well.
Yeah.
She won't leave me alone. I said, you look after the house, I look after the garden.
You do have a wonderful garden. From what
Yeah,
I've seen, it's
oh,
amazing.
yeah.
It's very nice.
Well, we travelled, from when we got married, we travelled everywhere. We used to go twice a year, sometimes for 3 weeks, sometimes for 2 weeks, in different places. Like we'd go to Lanzarote, Gran Canaria, all those islands there we would go. Different times. We would go to Spain quite a lot, to the various places in Spain and the islands, and the Greek islands. We went to, my brother lived in South Africa.
Really?
Yeah, 56 years he lived out there. When he finished with the Merchant Navy, he finished with the Royal Navy, joined the Merchant Navy. He was on the ships back and forth to, from Britain to South Africa. And then he settled in, he finished up in South Africa and got work there. And he was there for 56 years before he died. And Iris and I went out there twice to visit him. We went in 2000 and 2002. We went out there for a month each time, because I had nieces and nephews as well out there. And we went, I spent 2 weeks with my brother and then 2 weeks with my niece. He was in Cape Town, and my niece, she was in Johannesburg. On the outskirts of Johannesburg. You never lived in Johannesburg. If you went into Johannesburg in your car, you locked everything, the windows, the doors, and everything.
It was that bad?
Very bad.
Oh, okay.
They had all these guys along the pavements. You couldn't walk on the pavement. They were selling things. And then Iris, of course, had relatives in America. So we went out there twice and had holidays in New York, and they took us everywhere. And when we was in South Africa, my brother used to take us everywhere. Up in the mountains, we go to it was a huge farm, and they had a big tractor and a trailer, and the visitors, you sit on the tractor and on the trailer, then they take you right up in the mountains.
Really?
Yeah. And right on top of the mountain, there was a building for people who walked, hitchhiked, walked,
Yeah,
went on long walks.
Yeah.
And in the middle of the field was a tap. So you could have a drink.
That's convenient, yeah.
Yeah. And you could look down over the mountain, and down below everything seemed about that big. Very high mountain. Went up through the clouds.
Oh, really?
My brother, he was all dressed up, see, and me and my wife, we were like this. I said, well, you've got a coat on. He said, you'll find out, he said. And we found out. Rigging wet. And I had a timeshare in Madeira.
Where's that?
That is, let me see. It's out in the Atlantic. It's further on than Gran Canaria. Gran Canaria, then you had Madeira, and Madeira was the most beautiful country.
Really?
High mountains. Every morning you would get up, and it would be the steam on the top of the mountain, and it would clear. And four of you could get a taxi. At that time then, it was £50 for four of you, and he would have different routes, and you pick which route you wanted to go on, and then he would take you all day for 9 hours around.
One taxi?
And take you to the restaurants and everything.
Oh, that's not...
And there's some beautiful restaurants out there too. They used to do a lot of this, the meat and all, on a big hook thing, hang up over the fire. And then they come over to you and they push it down onto your plate. But it was a beautiful country. And lots of waterfalls coming out of the side of the mountains. You go up, and they did the tunnels through the mountains, and they didn't line them. There was still the stone in there, and it'd be dripping with water. It was a very exciting road. The road would come down, zigzagging all the way down. Oh, it was quite a nice place. I had that for 7 years. And then they sold it then, and I joined another outfit where Iris and I could pick out where we wanted to go. Decide which hotel we were going to stay in and go there. So we've had quite a active life actually.
Yeah, it's
running around.
Makes me very happy to hear that, because I know about a lot of people who are also in their later years and they haven't done a lot and they don't even want to go. They're just very, why would I go anywhere else? I'd rather just stay here with the garden. I'd rather just take care of the garden. But you can tell that they need a break.
Yeah.
But none of them want to go. They're just very.
I always advise my children, if you can afford it, go on holiday.
Travel. See the world.
Yeah, travel around. Go where you can. Do what you can afford to do. And most people at home used to live. Spain was one of the main ones they used to go to.
I see.
Because it was so cheap. The beer was only £1 a pint.
So that's a big reason why people went there.
Oh, yeah, and the food was quite good. But and of course you always had sunshine, didn't you?
Yeah, and I guess in Great Britain you don't have a lot of that, do you?
A lot of rain. Where we live, we get a lot of rain. But it's in the path of Ireland. It comes off the Atlantic, across Ireland, and it'll cross into Wales. It's a very wet country. Scotland is a very wet country too, on times. England, you can have different, because it's much bigger than Wales. Wales is only small compared to England. The only thing I wish in Wales is that we had good people in the Welsh Parliament, not idiots.
I'd rather not go into that side because we could stay here for several hours.
Yeah, but you know, his latest thing that the one in charge is that they don't do no more road repairs.
Hmm.
They can't afford to do it.
Really?
And they very much need a new road, because if one part of the motorway goes through tunnels and the traffic is miles back. Now they wanted to go around that, and he stopped them doing it. You know, it's just don't make sense. And he also spent our money, the ratepayers' money, on buying a field where once a year they have what they call is the Green Man Festival.
Mm-hmm.
They build a big man, a green man, and they have all the beer and all the food and everything there. He spent our money on that. Then with the Wrexham Football Club, owned by the Americans, plenty of money, he puts money in there as well. So what do you do?
This one is a bit more towards fatherhood and everything, since
Yes.
you know you have 5 children, which is quite a lot.
Yes.
Really, I was really wondering more about manhood and fatherhood. What do you think a real man looks like? A real masculine man is like, you know, both physically and mentally. You know, when it comes to his values. How should a real man be like? I know it's quite a kind of a broad question, but I think
Yeah, it's a hard one to answer, that is really. You should always be true to your own nature, and you should also look after your family and keep as fit as you possibly can. Many men now, in modern times, now go doing the exercises in these various gyms. Some, I think, overdo it because they build big muscles, and I don't think that. I think you should grow normal, have a normal type body, and always the main thing to me is when you grow up is to look after yourself and look after your family and bring them up in the right way, bring them up to respect people.
Mm-hmm.
And always with your wife you should always work together. You should help one another whatever you're doing. You work as a team and not as individuals. And I don't think you can go far wrong if you're married is working in a team. There's so many relationships break up because the man want to do this and the woman want to do that, and some want children and some don't want children. With me, we both wanted children. We didn't expect to have as many, but we ended up with them nevertheless. And my wife, she went through a major heart operation and survived it. And she used to look after the children. I used to supply the money for the clothes and everything. Another thing I don't believe in, you see, is that when you were married, a lot of men don't tell their wife what they're earning. They give them a sum of money and tell them that they got to manage on that. Now my eldest brother was like that. He would never tell his wife what he was earning. She found out through some other reason. And when I went to work and I got my money, I took it home and put it on the table. And I say to the wife, you take what you want out of it for whatever you want, and I will have the rest what's left.
I see.
And don't be miserly with it. You should never ever say to your wife, I'll give you £10 and I'll have 40.
Yeah, no, I think, you want to make the money so that you can provide for your family.
Yes.
I think, for me, as being being a man, being a masculine man, that's what it's about. It's about building the family and
that's right.
taking
The
care of them.
the main thing is that you see to them first and you last.
Yeah. You sacrifice and
Yeah.
you sacrifice
If you're lucky, you have a few pence left over to go and have a pint.
Have you had people like that in your life, like these masculine figures, these men who they?
Oh, there's lots of them I met. When I work with about 500 people who were part of the organisation I was in, and some of them were the masterly type, I'm in charge type with their wives and all, and others where their wives, some of them, they would beat their husbands.
Oh wow.
Yeah, they would, when we'd been paid, they would come, and as soon as he got his pay packet, he'd take it off him.
Oh wow.
And if he said he'd see him, bump.
Wow.
And then we had others who they got on all right, but they would argue a lot.
I see.
And the one family I knew very well, he was very friendly. He was a very strong man, very strong man. He knocked. They tried to pinch his car once, 4 of them, and he knocked them all out and laid them out on the grass.
Really?
Yeah. And the one who was to employ him to be his bodyguard when he was after somebody else's wife. But him and his wife, now his wife was very fiery. She was from the Glasgow in Scotland, which is a very, very hard place. The Glaswegians. You could hardly understand the talk there. And she used to swear a lot and fight him. And he'd punch her, knock her over the settee, and she'd get back up and get at him. And he'd be all marked.
Well, at least he was reciprocal.
But they stayed together.
Yeah.
They stayed together. And one day I was with my wife and I met him, and his wife was effing and blinding and swearing. Shouldn't do. And he said to her, quiet. He said, you don't swear in front of him and his wife. But there was others who just had normal lives, but there was many men. I found many men who, like I said, were very mean to their wives. They used to beat their wives and give them nothing.
That's not good.
They had to do as they were told.
That's no way to live.
No, that's the wrong attitude altogether. If you were married, you must work as a unit. You must help one another and work together. Not try and work against one another. That is stupid, because all it ends up in arguments, and that is wrong.
Sorry?
My brother used to say to me, why do you get your pay packet? I said, well, why don't you? Why do you hide it? Why can't you turn around and say to your wife, this is what I earn, and this is what you can have? No. He said, you give them so much, he said. You don't spoil them.
Well, it depends, I think it depends what kind of person you get to marry, because if it's the kind of woman who takes your money away and runs off with it, somewhere, then I don't think that's a good choice.
So, you don't want that. You don't want that at all. You want somebody who you both understand one another. I mean, it was hard at first for me and Iris, because we've both been married and both lived different styles of lives.
Mm-hmm.
And at first, you've got to get really to know yourself and know your wife again. And we soon settled down and got on with life. And as I say, we always used to help one another. Of course, she had a shop. Iris had a shop, general stores. and I was working in the steel industry, and in the night time then, before we were married, when we was courting, I would phone her up at 12 o'clock in the night because I knew she would be up, and she would be painting.
Really?
Painting the doors or something. And she's the same now. She won't let, if I want to paint something, she's got to do it. You don't know how to do it. I can do it better now, but I'm not allowed to do it. She does quite a lot of painting. And now together we painted the bungalow together. Because there's only one part where we couldn't reach. Was the one side was very high, but the other was on a level. Because the bungalow was built up, the ground was built up to put the bungalow on. But you had a long drop down the one side, and we couldn't do that, but we could do all the rest of it. I used to do it at first. I'd get a big ladder and put up there and paint, but in the end they got too much, so we had somebody else would come and paint it for us, so the one side. And of course we had, you know, the walls going around after the patio. We paint those together. We done it before we come away, actually.
Really?
Yeah. We painted all there, and she painted all the steps. She painted them grey now. She got a grey wall going around where the fence was on the top. All that's grey now. Grey steps going down.
Not much colour, eh?
And the outside top of the wall is grey, and then the rest is white.
I see.
But, she amazes me the way she keeps going. She just don't give up at all. She never sits down and relaxes.
Yeah, I can tell.
Only in the night time when she's watching the television, she's stopping. And then when we go to bed, I always go to bed at 10 o'clock. Mm-hmm. And she'll follow in later, or she'll follow in the same time. And then we got a television in the bedroom, haven't we? I'm asleep and she's watching the telly. She watches these Love Island things. And what's the other one? Ben Fogle. He goes to all different countries, and people who have had really, really good jobs with big money, and they've decided they don't want it no more, and they've gone out in the wilds and built themselves a home out there and live out there in the wilds. Mm-hmm. And feed off the land. And he goes to all these places, and you've got a woman there who she was 60 odd now, and she lived on her own right out in the wilds. And she had everything she wanted around her. And I thought, well, there's a time come now when she gets a bit older, she's not going to be able to do it. So what do you do then? You know, it's when you look at it, it's a worrying factor that some of these people, they go, and they got children, they teach the children themselves. And they teach them all about the land, and what you should do and what you shouldn't do on the land. And they never go to school. They taught out there in the wilds.
Well, if it's something maybe, but I guess they don't really get to choose, do they? But you know, if it were something that they wanted to do and they were happy living there, then
yeah,
maybe. But if they really wanted to go out in the world and see things, then that wouldn't be the best approach.
Yeah, and there's one place in America. It's a huge place, and there's all broken down wagons and rubbish and everything around, and they go and live on this place where they haven't got to pay no taxes or anything.
Oh my God.
And they live in these old shacks.
Oh.
And some of them do metal work and sell it, and others do different things, repair cars or whatever. And he was with them for a long time, and you just can't understand why they do it.
You know what? Regarding those masculine figures in your life, how do you think people should find the mentors, like those kinds of people? You know, how should we strive to find those mentors in our life? Have you managed to find them successfully in yours? Have you had those people that you looked up to a lot and that you wanted to be like when you were younger?
Oh yeah, I had an uncle who I always looked up to. He was a director of Scottish Post Offices, very educated. He went to university, and my father went to work so that he could go to university, his brother. And I always looked up to him because he was a very strong-willed man. He could speak 8 or 10 languages.
Wow.
And
8 or 10?
He could speak Welsh, and he could speak Gaelic.
Gaelic?
Yeah, the Scottish accent. And he used to go to these big, they used to have like parties, and they would compete against one another. And he would dress up in a Scottish kilt and the sporran, and his wife would dress up in a Scottish dress. And his daughter, the eldest daughter, my cousin, she would compete against him in it. And she was in charge of all the computers in the post office. She was the one who looked after everything on that side. And when he was the Postmaster General, he was the head of the post office in Scotland. He made this for the outlying regions where it was difficult to get it. He arranged then for vans to go out to those areas to deliver the mail, and also if they wanted food delivered, deliver that as well.
Dedicated.
And he organised all that.
It's dedication, you know, that's hard work.
Yeah. Yeah, and he loved rugby. We would all go to the pub first and have a good drink, and then we go to the match.
So, for maybe we had the luck to find those people in our lives. I've had the luck to to find people that I look up to and the people that I want to be more like. But what would you say, with the experience that you have and everything, about to the younger people maybe who feel a bit lost, the people who right now they're just moving through life and they don't have any sense of direction, they don't have anybody guiding them, maybe they don't have the best families and everything.
Yeah. The problem with a lot of young people today is they don't respect their family. They go out on their own and they live on the street, and then they're complaining that they haven't got a house or something. They could go and live with their parents, but they won't.
Yeah, it feels too much of an ego hit.
Yeah, they don't like to be told what to do. And this is silly. I think families should always stick together, whatever the outcome. If one of them does something wrong, you should stick with them and help them. You should help them to live a good life. And like I say, the main thing with young people, they got no respect now for, a lot of them, for their families or for the law. Police, they blame the police for everything. And it's not the police, it's them. They don't like being stopped and searched, because a lot of them carry knives today. And they say they carry them for their own safety, but they don't. As soon as they pull that knife, they use it.
Yeah.
And it's silly. And every day you were listening to the television, and there's somebody been stabbed just before we come away. A 14-year-old in the part in his birthday party, a 17-year-old in his birthday party, and he got stabbed and killed.
Wow.
That's the type of people you've got about. You just don't know what some of them are going to do, and a lot of them will argue with their parents.
And this is, what I feel very lost about, because these people, they are the ones that need mentors. They don't need those people, but they don't really find them in a lot of places, especially because they don't want to listen to their families. They don't want to do all these things and actually get to have some sense of order so they can move on. So they're just left on the streets, and they're just spending most of their time outside with people that that are not good for them.
That's it. And there's lots of places where they can go for help.
Definitely.
They have lots of places, and they got places, for the ones who got mental problems, to help them, but they won't go, and a lot of them, yes, especially the young girls, they won't eat. They have food and then they make themselves sick, and in the end they die because they won't listen to anybody, not the doctors, their parents, and there's a lot of it goes on. They call it bulimania. It's a thing where they think that they're too fat.
Yeah.
They're really like that, but they think they're too fat, so they won't keep their food down. And it's silly, really. I don't understand a lot of the modern generation back home now, because they're nothing like we were disciplined. We taught to respect the police and your parents, and you didn't argue with them. They were right, and whether they were right or not, they were right, and you obeyed it. And now there's none of that anymore.
Yeah, I feel like maybe that could be something that I think could fix a lot of the issues of the generation. If they started disciplining themselves, if they started realizing that life is more than just a game.
Yes.
Because this is how I used to spend a lot of my time before. Several years back, I would be playing these computer games all the time, hours and hours on end.
That is another thing, isn't it? Computer games.
I was doing that. I was doing all these bad habits that would just made my life horrible.
Yeah.
And then I just thought that I just end up somehow fixing things without doing anything. But then I only started fixing things in my life and actually improving myself in a good way after I realized that I have to do it myself. That nobody's
You've got
gonna
to,
do
it. You've got to discipline yourself to do it and get on with it, and not dilly-dally about it. Just get on and live your life properly. Now, when we were children, we used to have all different sorts of games we used to play. You get inside a rubber tyre, big wheel, and they bowl you down the hill. Or they'd put you in the tyre, and they'd have whoever's on the either side of the road with tyres, bowl it at you and knock you over. And we would tie some of the houses, the doors were like that, and they had an alleyway going through there. And we would tie the knockers together to knock on the door, tie those together, and then we would take a thin cord across the road to go behind the edge and pull a knock about, and they'd try to open the door. And then they'd come around the other side, and then they'd be looking for us. or you knock the door and run away hide. You got to do all sorts. And there was a thing they used to call it kick the tin. You used to see who could kick a tin the furthest. And they'd play football in the road with a tin. Do anything. And do you know what hopscotch is?
Hopscotch? I don't think so.
It's a game that mainly girls play. And they chalk out the thing with squares.
Oh yeah, okay, yeah.
And there's wings, and then you push the thing, and where it stops you go, and we compete against them. And you had games like that, and tag.
Yes.
One in the middle.
Yes.
You had all those sort of games. We played those, and then we would go down on the field by the houses and play football. And in the summer we would play cricket. We never had games like you got today. To me it drives me mental. Where we live, you never, hardly ever see a child out playing. They're all in the house with their gadgets. And they built a new estate down by us now. And the only time you see the children is when they're going to school and when they're coming home from school. You never see them out playing. It's just, and the place is quiet, like here now, quiet as a mouse. You don't hear a thing. Any odd occasion you might have a couple of them come out in the evening with their parents, if they're having a barbecue or something. That's the only time of year I'll see them. The rest of the time they're...
Alright, so here I also had a question. What are the values and beliefs that kept you going through difficult times? When you had difficult times in your life? Or the things that...
I don't really know. I just thought I got to overcome them and keep going. You know, you can't give in to these things. You've got to fight them and beat them. And I had times when I was really down, but I just fight against it and come through it in the end. You mustn't give in. Too many people, something happens to them and they won't fight against it. They let it take over them. And I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't let anything like that happen. I once had a bad manager and he used to be on top of me all the time and he used to drive me mad. And in the end I beat him. I got him the sack.
Really?
Yeah. He thought he was clever, but he wasn't as clever as Roy.
Oh well.
No, you just got to be determined that you're going to sort yourself out and keep going. Don't give in to nothing.
Discipline, discipline
yourself.
yourself.
Oh, discipline. I am very disciplined, me. She gets on to me for it. I will organise, if I do the table, everything's got to be just so.
No, I've been trying in the past while to actually discipline myself more and more because I've realized just how important it is.
Yeah.
I've realized, that if I wouldn't have been disciplined, I wouldn't have been exercising consistently because in the past while, I've actually started doing exercise a lot more and being much more fit and everything.
Yeah.
And before I could not get to exercise by my own initiative. I always had a big authority figure, somebody else to just tell me, do this, do that.
Yeah.
I never really did it by my own.
No, but what you find, I think, when you're in that position and you need to exercise, you need to do something different to take your mind off whatever your problem is. And you keep going then. Eventually you beat it. And don't never give in to it. You've got to, like, if say you didn't go to a gym, you just carried on really, and if something started to get you, the good thing was to go and join a gym.
And take your anger out.
And get yourself around that, and that'll get around your head, and you're away then, you started to like it. And you keep going and going. I started going, one time I wasn't feeling all that good when I was in my 60s. And I and the brother and sister-in-law, we all joined the gym. But I used to go mad. I used to make things harder than I should.
That's good.
They had this walking thing, and you could make it steep and make it harder. And everything I done, I made it harder than I should. And the rowing machine.
Oh, really?
In the end, I felt all right. That's what you've got to do, is find something to distract you from what your problem is, and then get on with it.
I made a video before talking about detaching away from the problem.
That's it, yes.
That's essentially, when I came to the UK and came to you guys, that's what I did. Back at the time I was getting bullied in school a lot. I was even getting threatened. I was once being threatened of being stabbed.
Yeah.
And then, later I think I came to the UK, I left all of that behind for a week, and I was there and I felt so nice and I felt amazing, and I was away from the problem.
Yeah.
And I was able to consciously think and rationalize and come up with good solutions to that problem, and in the end I fixed it all.
Well, that's what you've got to do. That is the only way to beat it. is you are the only one who can do it. Somebody else can't do it. They tell you to go to psychiatrists and all. They can't do it. You got to do it.
They can help you come to conclusions in your mind, but it's you in the end.
Yeah, they can help you to a certain extent, but you are the one in here. You got to be saying, "I'm going to beat it."
Yeah, you know, there's so many people that go to the therapist with all these problems, but they don't want to fix them. They're lazy and they just go there. So they're like, "Hey, I'm doing this, so leave me alone."
Yeah, that's it.
And then they come out and then they wonder why their lives are still shit.
they just get into a habit of going.
Yeah.
It's not doing them any good, like. Right, what's next then?
What does success, in your opinion, look like for you? I mean, not necessarily, you know, in terms of career success, or maybe whatever comes to mind when you think of your success.
I think success is a part of your everyday living. You if you've got a job and you get on with it and you get promotion and everything, that is a success to me. Not letting anything get you down, just keep going and think of what's in front of you. Think of the future, not the past, the future. And in the end, I think you will be successful in gaining what you want. One of the things that I found was successful was when I beat that manager. That to me was success. He was a bullying type, and I wouldn't have it. And in the end, I beat him, and that is success to me. Beating something that is trying to get you down, and to get on with your life. You've got to get on with your life. You've got to enjoy your life, and
don't let other people. Bring
every
you down.
opportunity you get, you should go and have an holiday and spend your time forgetting about everything. Just go and enjoy it. And like you said, you went there, you forgot it. You conquered what you wanted to conquer, and that is the only way you will do it. And that is part of success, I think. And the other thing is, you know, getting on in life, from being at the bottom, getting to the top as a manager. That is a good success. But other than that, I don't know.
To me, maybe success could also be finding the right person to make a family with. Maybe those could be like some great successes as well. Yeah.
That is a big success if you can do that, because relationships don't always work out. You might be caught in a young lady for a while, but in the end,
you have to move on.
Your opinions like part. You haven't got the same ideas that partner's got. You've got your own ideas, they got theirs. And in the end, you've got to just move on and go to the next. And you will eventually find the right partner.
Also, there's this other question. It's also regarding fatherhood, and this is a bit personal for you, but how does the right true father look like for you? You know, like if you had to think of the best father that you could be, or you could have had in your life, or people could have in their life, what would he be like?
Well, he's got to be strict, and on the other hand, he's got to be kind, and he must guide you. He must guide you to whatever you want to do, and always be backing you. With different children, you got different ways of dealing with them. Some like you to be hard, some like you to be soft. Mostly you find with girls, if you really discipline them, they might listen to you. But the boys, they might go the opposite way. So you've got to coax them. And always, if they want to go and play rugby or anything, you go and watch them, you go with them. whatever sport they want to do, you go and follow them and you encourage them to do it. And try to get them to make it. My father always followed me to football, and my brothers. They always followed me. And I think that is a thing you've got to do with your family. You've got to follow what they, if they want to pick something, you mightn't agree with them, but at the same time, you've got to encourage them to do what they want to do and follow their aims in life. You can't just keep telling them you mustn't do this, you mustn't do that. That is wrong. You must encourage them to do things, not discourage them.
So, you did also mention this next question, which kind of mentioned some of the points that I thought of. What would be the most important values he should pass on to his children? You did mention being kind and being loving and being tolerating, disciplining maybe?
Well, you've got to have discipline in it. You've got to, don't matter how kind you are, you've still got to have discipline. If you haven't got discipline, then you can forget it, because they will go their own way and do their own thing and in the end make big mistakes. You've got to help them not to make those mistakes. Teach them not to make the mistakes. You get too many young children, they get in with a crowd and they start not taking the drugs. And you've got to steer them away from that. Tell them what problems they're going to end up with if they don't give it up or don't, follow the crowd. You haven't got to follow the crowd for everything. A lot of children think because the big shot boy, the hard one, they got to follow him, but you haven't. Because 9 times out of 10, he's not as tough as he makes out. Because if you challenge him, then he'll back off you. He won't stand. He's all right, well, he got a crowd around him, but when he's on his own and you challenge him, he'll back off. And you will be the one who's right and he'll be the one who's wrong.
Yeah, it did.
You mustn't give in. There's too many children today give in to the bully boy, and you mustn't. Never give in to a bully boy. Always stand your ground with him. All right, you might get a smacker now and again, but at the same time you've stood your ground, you knows what you're going to do. And in time, you get to the position where you were strong enough to give him a hiding. So, you just got to do it.
What would be a message that you could give out to younger people who are starting to want to have a family, who are starting to prepare for being a father? What would be some advice that you would give them?
Really, what I would tell them first of all is not to go into things too quickly. Not just have sex for the sake of having sex. Measure what you're going to do. Decide what you're going to do. Can I afford to have a family? Or can't I? And if you can't, then you should wait until you can afford to. And you should always consult with your partner as well, what their opinion is of having a family. Because many times these men, they think they can just go and do it and that's it. But you've got to take the female side of it as well as the male side of it. And there's not much else you can really say. It's up to you to not to rush into things, as it were, but to decide whether or not you can actually afford to keep a family. Because many people, they're poor and they have all these children and they can't really look after them. And another thing you could, which is I think is a good thing, is to decide how many children you're going to have, 1 or 2.
Or 3 or 4.
Yeah, but I would say a nice steady family is 2 or 3 children, and if you're lucky you can have one of a girl and one of a boy, if you're lucky. But because back home they always used to say, you're not a man until you've had a boy and a girl. So I had 4 girls and 1 boy. But it's really up to the individual what they feel about it and what they think about it. But they got to take into mind the looking after them, the money side of it, as well as the having children. Because if you can't afford to have them, why have them? You know, you ruin their life in the end.
Do you have any regrets of your own regarding fatherhood?
Yeah, having too many. It's a very expensive...
You couldn't stop at 2 children, you had to keep going.
It's a very expensive item. No, not really. You live with what you got. And sometimes children come along where you're not expecting. You know, you think you've had 2 children and that's it. And next thing is a third one or a fourth one. Some of the families where I lived, when I was a boy, they had as many as 13 or 14 children.
Jesus, wow.
Yeah. And brought them up well, you know.
That's something, you know, to have that many children and bring them up well.
The thing was that the fathers had a good job, so they didn't have to worry about money too much. And the mothers were good, they looked after them. But you've got to be in a position where you know you can look after a child. It's no good having children just for the sake of having children. You must be in a position where you can look after them, bring them up, and make sure that they're safe and everything else. Otherwise, don't have them. Yeah. So my one granddaughter, she won't have no children. She don't believe in it. She don't like children. She literally do not like children. She likes dogs and cats, but she don't like children. And lucky for her that the young man who she lives with, he don't want any either, so they're in a good position. Yeah. And I think the other ones can't make a mind up. And another thing, see, there's a lot said for education, but at the same time, like I got a granddaughter who never went to college or anything. She finished when she was in the 6th form, finished and went out to work. And she'd done quite a number of different jobs. She worked in a club behind the bar, and she'd done other things. Then she went with her mother to a firm that makes microchips, and they were making redundancies, and she'd only just started, so she left and applied for a job up country with another firm with similar things and engineering, and they taught her engineering. She's a manager now, and she travels all over the world.
Wow.
She's been to China, Japan, Germany, France, Belgium, you name it, America.
Wow.
And she's her own boss. She don't stand no messing. She went to China, and the Chinese woman who she was dealing with come the following day and said, "You haven't done so and so and so and so." And she turned around to her and said, "No, you don't read your texts, what I send you." She said, "So you read the text and you'll get the answer. Don't come telling me what I'm not doing, it's you are not doing it." And from then on they got on well. And she went back out there recently. But where was she? Hong Kong, I think. Either Hong Kong or Singapore she'd just been to. And she's a lesbian, by the way. And her partner is a top nurse. And she decided they want children, so that she's had 2 children. And my they're in my granddaughter's name. They named Carpenter, not anything else. And the 2 children they've had, 2 girls, they're brilliant. They're really good at the schools, and their father was a doctor, and he fathered the both of them. And they get on real well, all of them, and they travel when they're home. They travel when they can, wherever they can get to. They've been abroad. They've been on a cruise. They go and my son, he pays for a lot of it for them, but the granddaughter, the one who's in the business of electronics and what have you, she went half shares with him, bought a caravan, a stationary one.
Mm-hmm.
And they take it in turns, and it's down by the seaside, and they take it in turns to go there. It's about 40 miles from where they live, and they go and spend time there together.
This is also kind of a related question to love and relationships. How do you think, this is again a pretty broad question, but how do you think that you should love a woman? You know,
how you should love a woman, but first and foremost is by respecting her. And secondly is to work in a partnership together, to understand each other, not to be the boss and tell them they got to do this, they got to do that. You work together, and you must always respect them. You should never abuse a woman, and you should never strike a woman. Anybody who strikes a woman wants shooting. You should never abuse a woman, and you should do things together. You know, whatever you're doing, whether you're going to a concert and you agree to go together, or whether you're doing the housework or anything else, you pile in and help. And
you don't let the resentment of these things get in the way.
No, you mustn't. You mustn't do any of that. It's really a partnership, a very close partnership. You do everything you can together.
It's true. Do you believe love and relationships should or shouldn't be young men's biggest priority right now? You know, if, take me for example, should I be bent on just finding the right girl and settling down, or should I try to go for something else?
No, I think you should try different, partnerships until you find the one that suits you. You might see a girl as, oh, I love her, but after a while that love wears off, because you both of you haven't got the same type of opinion. I think you should do what they say, do the rounds. Until you find the one that you really know is the right one. But
do you believe that you should make this your main priority, to try to find that woman in your life at all times? Or maybe you should, this is how I see it, that maybe, you have to be disciplined first, you have to build yourself up as a person, and then try to look for that.
Yeah, I don't think you should prioritize it. You should just let it happen. You shouldn't go all out to look for it, because somewhere along the line you're going to meet a young lady and she's going to go bump, and your heart's going to go jump, and that's it then, you've had it, she got you. No, you don't, you haven't got to prioritise anything like that. That comes natural. That will come natural. It's just one of those things that you don't expect it, and all of a sudden it hits you.
But I'm expecting that, it would hit you and you would actually be there if you'd actually done the work first, if you'd actually built yourself up as a person first. Because I had this belief in my mind, that I'm just going to not do any kind of work. I'm not going to try to get fit. I'm not going to try to even look good, look acceptable, presentable as a young man. Maybe, and one day, a random girl will just appear in my life and fix all my problems.
Oh yeah, but it doesn't work like that, you see, because you can be as well dressed as anything, and the other one could be a scruffy bugger, and he'll win the girl and you won't. It's whether there's how could the word you could use is, it's like a kaleidoscope. You just itsu, and that's it. You haven't got to be anything special. You haven't got to be a manager or you haven't got to be a muscle man or anything. It's just all of a sudden it'll come. And it'll come when you're least expecting it, and that'll be it then. You just feel that you can't live without that person, and then you eventually get to where you court in and you marry them. But I don't think you can actually work out what you're going to do. What you can't build up to it because you don't know when it's going to happen. You just don't know. You might see a girl today who you really fancies, and then the next day you might see one who you fancies more. And you might have one who fancies you more. And that's it. I mean, with women it's strange because you could be going out with a girl, but there might be one or two other girls who got their eye on you, and they'll try and muscle in. So you've got to take it as it comes.
When it comes to people in a relationship that's not really working out, maybe, when do you think it's time for them to draw the line? Or do you think maybe it can work for some problems, but when maybe they've been together for years and they keep arguing and they keep fighting and everything, when do you think it's time to draw the line? Because maybe there's some people going through that and they don't really know where to stop.
Yeah, you've really got to start it right from the beginning. If they got a certain thing and you don't want to do it, you've got to tell them straight. It's got to finish. No messing about. Just finish it. Otherwise, we are finished, and that's it. You can't do it any other way. You've got to be cruel to be kind.
I like that. Be cruel to be kind.
Yes, and that very often happens in life.
That's true. How should we avoid going into relationships with people that aren't compatible with us? Finding that person that doesn't have the right opinions as we do. How can we avoid that? Or do you think there's a way to avoid it, or do you think it just happens?
There is no real way to avoid it. The only thing that at the end of the day you've got to decide, is she for me or not? I don't agree with the way she does things, and she mightn't agree with the way you do things. You've got to be in a position where you were both on the same line. It's no good being with somebody who you're not really happy with because they do things and you think you can stop them from doing it, because you won't. They'll just carry on doing it and it'll make life worse all round. So you best cut it off straight away and either you change or that's it, finish.
I see. Do you think authenticity plays a role when it comes to finding the right person to be with? Being authentic, being true to you and the other person?
Oh yeah, you've got to be true to the other person.
I mean, I've always heard these people, doing the sweet lies and the sweet talking and everything. Then they end up in the relationship, and they realize that the girl that they're with, she likes the version of them who was faking their behavior, who was, she was in love with the person that they were faking to be,
Yeah.
And you cannot carry that for too long.
No, you can't do that. You gotta know exactly what you're doing. It's difficult to explain really with relationships, because sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. Sometimes you think they're working, but they're not, and you end up quarrelling and wish you never got married or whatever. At 10, you will know you got the right person, and they will know they got the right person, because you'll be inseparable.
I see. I have some questions here, that the ones that I was talking to you about. They're from Leonard and from Daniel, and I have like 2 or 3 from Leonard and several from Daniel, like 2 of them. So Leonard, this is exactly what he asked. What were you doing at 16? He was asking what were you doing at my age, or respectively his age. He's in his 20s.
Yeah.
In your everyday life, what were you doing at my age or his age in his 20s in your everyday life?
What was I doing?
Yeah, what were you preoccupied with?
Oh, I was courting.
You're out playing, aren't you?
I was courting, and I used to. I mean, we weren't together all time, all day. She would have things to do, and I would have things to do. Like I might be playing football, and she might be going dancing. Like my wife was a good dancer, I never danced.
I see.
Never.
Oh.
I got 2 left legs. I fall over myself, but you still, although you might be really in love, you've still got to do things that you want to do, and they got to do things that they want to do. And as long as it's not interfering with your lives together, well, that's it. I mean, you wouldn't want to see him going out with another bloke, like, would you?
I hope not.
And I wouldn't like to see you going out boozing with your mates all the time.
Yeah, that's true.
You just got to. It's surprising once you get to that position. Everything seems to click together, and you just go on your merry way then, and enjoy life. You've got to enjoy life. Whatever you do, you've got to enjoy life. It's no good sitting about moping. It's no good saying I'm not going out because I don't want to go out. When they do want to go out, you just got to get on with it, and enjoy it. Make it enjoyable as well.
Something that I also want to clarify, I want to mention to maybe the people who are watching, is that maybe enjoying yourself, it doesn't necessarily have to mean to be doing everything that everyone else likes to enjoy. Maybe sometimes what you want to do and what makes you feel happy is not what's going to be making someone else happy, and you should be doing the things that you like, even maybe if they're not well seen by other people.
No, you haven't got to follow the crowd. You've got to be yourself,
yeah,
and do what you want to do and enjoy it. A lot of people that go around and they go around in like gangs. It's not a gang, but
yeah,
you got, say you got a girl and I got a girl, and then somebody else got a girl, and they all go together. But one of them might decide they want to do this, and you say, oh, I don't want to do that. So you don't do it. You let them do it, and you go and do what you want to do. You haven't got to be told what to do by anybody. You got to do what you want to do. You got to enjoy your life the way you want to enjoy your life. You know, it's you get too many people who they got all these friends, but they all got different ideas. And sometimes you go with them and you're as miserable as hell. and you say, well, you know, why am I doing this?
What was the point in that? Yeah,
that's it. So you gotta decide what you're going to do in life and in partnership. You will make friends. You'll make friends like you, and you will meet people and enjoy their company. But you haven't got to live in their pocket. You haven't got to do what they say. They say, oh, we're going so-and-so next week. I'm not going there. I can't. I've got something else on. You've got to do what you want to do.
What were some of the topics that you thought about, or the problems that you had, and the good things in your life at that time? I'm gonna start this off with one question. What were the topics you thought about maybe in your 20s when you were a bit younger? What were the things that interested you, or the things that were constantly on your mind?
The things I was interested in mostly when I was young was sport.
Sport.
Yeah, especially rugby. You know, I used to go to the matches, and if I had to go to Scotland, I go to Scotland to watch the match. And we would, like when we was courting, we would go swimming together, go to the various places swimming, and in the evening we might just sit in the house chatting or something, but other times we'd just go off and watch a show. It depends on how things work out, sort of thing. It comes back to the old thing all the time that you've got to enjoy life. Yeah. You must enjoy it. And another thing I used to like doing as well when I was young, I had a dog, a big dog, and I used to take him walking for miles. And
he wouldn't get tired, would he?
Fool around with him. And very often you get a girl and all if you had a good dog.
What about the problems that you felt as if you had back then? You know,
problems?
Yeah. What were the difficulties of that time?
Well, the biggest problem back in those days was money. You know, you didn't have enough to do what you wanted to do. And you had to make do with what you had. Sometimes you'd come up, like I said, with problems in work where you had somebody was trying to bully you and that, and you should never let that happen to you. And I don't think I can't really say that I had any major problems when I was young at that age.
You were never really thrown into the whole aggressive drinking and smoking and those things. They were never really a part of your environment.
I didn't smoke until I went in the army when I was 19. 18 I was, but 19 I started smoking, because what they would do, they would come around and wake you up in the middle of the night and say, have a fag, Taff, have a fag. And you say, no, I don't smoke. The next thing then, you would wake up in the morning and they would have carried your bed out and put it on the stairs.
Oh, wow.
They get up to all sorts. So in the end, they said, oh, give us a cigarette and let us smoke.
So they were trying to be nice to you, or maybe they were just trying to figure out who was the one that was not smoking? What were they trying to do?
They weren't trying to be nice, they were messing about.
I see.
You know, come on, we're going just to Taff tonight, and because he was from Wales, he was called a Taff. And another thing the one used to do, he was a London boy and a bit of a wild boy, and you feel this on your forehead, and you wake up and he says, do you want to buy a ticket for a battleship, Taff? They get up to all sorts in the army.
So it wasn't just a place full of discipline and hard driving, it was also a place of fooling around.
Oh, lots of fooling around. Yeah. And fights.
Oh boy.
Some of them were fighting. And I remember that too. It was in the winter, very cold winter. We'd been on an escort with tanks, and we had tank suits on to keep warm. It was, I don't want it minus now, but the River Help was frozen over and he was skating on it.
What about the tank suits? What do you mean by tank suits? Were they the crewmen suits?
Like a all-in-one suit.
Oh yeah, like the ones that the crab.
Yeah, it was padded and all. Very thick suit.
Yeah, like the ones that the tank crews wore,
Yeah,
right?
that's it.
So-
That's it. That's it.
And you were given those as well?
We were issued with those to go when we took the tanks
Oh, okay.
in the
So
winter, because you had to go for miles and you stop in and you had to get out and patrol. So you had to have something warm on.
okay, so you didn't really have like winter equipment.
Yeah, you had what they call a greatcoat, overcoat,
Okay.
and all. But the tank suit, you didn't need anything else
Okay.
because it was that warm. And another thing what we didn't understand, you see, was in our country, when you get the winter and the snow, it used to be really cold. Not as low a temperatures you'd have here or in Germany. And when we was in Germany, the temperature would be right down and we'd be in just our battle dress. And we didn't feel cold because their cold was a dry cold.
Oh,
And
okay.
our cold was a wet cold.
Ah.
And you didn't feel it so much. And you used to laugh. You see them coming, you have earmuffs on, the hats on, big coats on. And you couldn't just believe it. We'd be just in a battle dress.
I see.
Yes. The weather conditions were altogether different. We loved, and the snow was crisp. Where at home, it was watery. And if you made a snowball and you hit somebody with it was hard. It's like having a brick inside it.
Yeah. And what I'm guessing that, in your 20s, maybe in your younger years, the good things in your life, it was you courting, it was you with this girl and going to rugby matches and everything. What were some other good things that you still remember that really meant a lot to you?
Other things we used to do.
Other good things, the things that you really liked.
Well, in those days, we used to like going to the cinema and things like that. And going for walks. We used to go for long walks. And I suppose, I don't know. Sometimes we would go to the lakes and I had a boat and go out on the boat and then go in the water for a swim. But it was just whatever came up, we went and done.
I see.
You didn't plan anything.
There was no planning and thinking about it too much.
Never planned anything. You didn't know what the future would bring.
Yeah. Oh, this is an extra thing, by the way. How did you feel growing up back then with the Cold War and everything? And back then had the bomb threats and the nuclear warfare thing just knocking on the door. How did it feel growing up in that time?
We never used to think about it.
Really?
No. We used to think they were all loonies.
Probably were, but
yeah, we never gave it a thought, really. Because they had a lot of spies in London. The Russians gave a lot of the secrets to the Russians. The people high up in the parliament, and they were Russian spies, and most of them were very educated people who had been to the big, like Oxford or Cambridge.
mm-hmm.
They'd been educated there, but they were spies for the Russians. And I used to love watching the old war films. That was one of my favourites.
How were they back then? Because now, when I see the war films now, they're very realistic. You have the big explosions, the big things. How were the movies back then?
It was very similar, very similar. I was in the army at the time, actually, and they made a film called They Were Not Divided. It was about the British troops in the desert when the Germans were pushing them back, and then when they started to advance back. And we supplied the tanks for that film.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And when they come back, you have to take the ammunition out. And the one who used to chuck it over the side, Yeah, we had the tanks and vehicle supply done for that film. I always remember that. And I took a German girl to see that film.
Aww.
She worked in a ration store. She was a daughter of a German general who the Russians killed. But they managed, her and her mother and her brothers managed to escape and come to the west side of Germany, you know, the western side.
Yeah. I'm also curious, you did mention a guy that you had that was driving your car, Hans. You mentioned Hans, the German guy that was shot
Hans,
for the leg and for the... What was the attitude towards those German veterans of the war? You know, maybe back then, you know, in their own country, how did people see their veterans? Were there a lot of them?
It's a funny thing because I was in a pub in Germany with some friends, and this one German who'd been in the war, he started spouting off.
Spouting off? What was he doing?
Shouting the odds, you know. And there was two others in there who come over to me and said, take no notice of him. He said, he's a bit with the war, he said. And when I was talking to him, the one said to me, he said, you ever lived in Newport or Cardiff, he said. I said, how do you know that? He said, I know the accent. He said, I was a prisoner of war in Newport.
Oh, wow.
Just behind where
wow.
He was in there.
Wow.
And we got on with a lot of them. We got, as I say, the troublemakers really were the Hitler youth.
Were the dumb kids that still didn't understand.
Yeah, still think Hitler was the boss. Half of them thought he was still alive, I think. And they were the only troublemakers. Other than that, the ordinary German who'd been in the war, you know, he was no different to any other soldier. Didn't want to go to war, but he had to go to war. And the same with us. If you've got to go to war, you've got to go to war.
Yeah, you know, I've seen it. I see it all the time, you know, and I think it's mostly been portrayed in movies, you know, and the Germans are always, everywhere, they're seen as the bad guys, you know, and when everybody thinks of the German soldier and everything, it just seems as if they're all always demonized to a great extent. Although some were horrible, but there's always horrible people everywhere. It's not just the German army, you know, it's so many places around the world.
Most of these soldiers didn't want to go out and fight.
They were just like you, they were conscripted into the army.
And they had to do it, you know, whether they liked it or not, they had to go and fight. And that was it. And if they didn't fight, they were shot by their own people. You know, it's like the Russians now, they put men forward who are not really suitable to do fighting. They haven't been trained enough. And then if they try to retreat, they shoot them. They just shoot them down, their own people. And it's wrong. It's wrong, you know, there don't seem to be any, the laws that exist about killing people and that. You don't go around, like with the SAS. Now the SAS never, ever shot civilians. They had you read in that book about one scene where they see a tanker when they're trying to hide away from them. And he said, I had him in my sights. He said all I had to do was press the trigger. But then he said, he looked again, and he said he was a civilian. He said, if I'd have shot him, I would have been in trouble with the British Army. He said I would have been court-martialed for shooting a civilian. But the Germans and the Russians didn't worry about that, did they?
Yeah. What are some...
And I don't say that the British was that good either. I expect they done as much as anybody else.
It just wasn't really that broadcasted.
It's not their normal life, and they just went out and done it. Yeah. Because it's sad really that they've got wars, and wars are caused through politicians, not through people. It's not the people who wants a war. They don't want to go. You don't want to go to war. It's the politicians. They decide that they want something and they're going to go to war and get it. and they don't stop and think about anything. You've got this Putin now. I can understand what he's trying to do. I understand what he's trying to do. Because Russia at one time had been amalgamated as one big country. And then when they got rid of the communism, they split up to their own countries where they originally were. But he don't want that. He wants them back as one big country.
Yeah.
And the people don't want it. They're too westernized now, most of them. And they just don't want things like that.
What do you think were some of the, or wait, what do you think are some of the big mistakes, coming back to you in your younger years? What are some of big mistakes that people should be looking out for and try to avoid in their lives, in their everyday lives?
One thing is being too greedy. Wanting more than they can have. You got to live your life as it comes. You can't plan. You can plan it if you want to, but it never works out. What are you planning?
Maybe it works.
Something comes along and pushes it off course. It's like a war could come, and all your plans are gone. And it's a difficult thing, really. I don't think you can plan your life at all. There's no real way you can plan it. You don't know what's going to happen tomorrow,
Yeah, but I feel like, having some sense of discipline and order, it could help you live your life better, because chances are you're not going to die tomorrow. A lot of people nowadays, they live into this party scene where they just drink and they get drunk and drug themselves every day, thinking that, well, maybe tomorrow I'm going to get hit by a bus.
Yeah.
But, most of the time they don't get hit by a bus,
No, it's living is a case of discipline. And discipline to yourself. That you decide what kind of life you're going to live, and you stick by the rules.
I like that. Living is a case of discipline.
Yeah, because when I was young, when I was 15, I used to go drinking. And I used to have the time of my life with all the boys. A gang of us would go out drinking and go to parties. But at the end of the day, it don't do you any good. You just as well gone on with your life in a different way. I don't regret having done it, because you learn by it. You learn by your mistakes.
That's true, yeah.
And that's the way to go about life. Try not to make too many mistakes. So.
What do you think, we talked about the big mistakes to avoid. What do you think are some of the big things to do? What are some big things that maybe when you're young that you should really do that are really good for you? Some of the big things that you could be doing.
Well, I suppose in one way is helping other people who are not as well off as yourself. And again, it's a hard thing to describe, really. Things that you should be doing and shouldn't be doing. You plan your life, and it doesn't always work out the way you plan it. Things happen in between that you can't do a thing about. You just comes back to that old discipline again.
That's true.
If you're not disciplined, well, you just as well give up, because you'll end up doing things you never should do. You got young people today carrying knives, and there was none of that when I was a boy. You never seen somebody carrying a knife. Everybody got on together. You had gangs, mine, who would fight fisticuffs, and they might have a gang, and they throw stones at each other from a distance.
Oh.
But you never had anything with knives. Nobody ever had knives. And I mean, I used to carry a knife. I had a commando knife that I was given, and I used to carry it around with me, fixed to my belt. But I would never draw it. I was that disciplined that I would never ever draw that out the scabbard. It was just showing off that I got a commando knife.
I mean, yeah, I think everybody would like to have a huge commando knife on their belt.
And my brother, the one who was in the Navy, he had about 5 different types of knives, ceremonial, with the swastika on German.
Wow.
I don't know where he got them from, but he had them. And I don't know what he done with them, but I think in the end he had to throw them overboard because of the customs coming on board.
That's a shame. You would have paid a fortune to have those now.
Oh, yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. I can remember during, when the war finished and the soldiers was coming home, I can remember a soldier who lived in Newport coming home, and he had an American Harley Davis motorbike. He brought home with him.
How the hell did he do that?
I don't know, but he did.
Wow. That's one hell of a thing to come back with.
Yeah. I can always remember it. He was the only one around who had a motorbike like it.
It was not just normal, it was a big one as well, a big clanky one, wasn't it?
Yeah. It was a real good motorbike. I was his son of Adam. Harley Davidson, a gold wing Japanese one. And it's like sitting in an armchair on them. For the passenger and the front rider.
Yeah.
But they're big bikes, heavy bikes.
Yeah.
You've got to be powerful to hold them up. He just bought a new motorbike now. It's in my garage.
Oh, really?
Puts it in my garage. He got motorbikes all over the place.
Yeah, I think he doesn't have any more place to add, and so he just puts them in there, doesn't he?
Yeah. He thinks that they're his pension.
Well, I mean, if he sells those, to some extent, you know, if he sells those, he can make a bunch of money off of them.
He sells them and he buys.
Oh, so that's what he does.
He got one motorbike, which is older than me.
Wow, really?
Yeah, it's 100 years old. It's the original narrow frame one. And he bought that. He's doing that up now. And he's got one special motorbike which is worth a lot of money. It's called a Motor Guzzi. They used to race them years ago, the Motor Guzzi.
I have some questions here also from Daniel. He has, I think, 2 of them. Yeah, I think 3, but they're not that big. So the first one, he asks, how do you define true happiness and fulfillment in life?
How do you define
happiness and true fulfillment in your life? Maybe you can answer this for yourself, because I think it really varies to a lot of people, doesn't it?
Well, the main thing is you've got to love the person you were with, and that's part of being happy, being the happiness of your life. And like I said before, do things together, enjoy life. You can't really put words to that.
Yeah, I see.
It's something that grows with you.
I see.
You've got to make it happen. You've got to make things happen to make yourself happy and to make the other person with you happy and your family happy. You've got to make it happen yourself. You've got to be good and kind and loving and all the rest of it.
And disciplined.
Well, discipline. I think discipline comes into every form of life. Discipline. If it's not discipline, well, forget it. You just live a haphazard sort of life.
I see. And yeah, I guess this would answer his next question, which is, what would be the most effective path to achieving it? It's to
Finding the right partner, isn't it?
yeah.
That is the real main thing, is finding the right partner and having the right job, something that you enjoy doing, not something where you go to work and hate it, the kind of job that you enjoy, and the right partner to share it all with. Other than that, there's no other way you could really define it. You've got to have the right people around you to enjoy life.
To what extent do you believe that our perception of reality is shaped by our senses, and how might this influence the way we understand and interact with the world around us?
Well, I think it is really by your senses that you come to decide all those things. You know, there's no other way really that you could do it. It's something that actually comes to you, and you know it's right or it's wrong. Again, it's another difficult question. I think your senses got a hell of a lot to do with how you define your life.
There's no senses, there's no personality to your life,
No,
is there?
there's not. And like I said, nobody can tell you how to do it. You got to do it yourself. You've got to decide your own ways and means. But the main thing is really and truthfully in life, you haven't got to get obstacles in your way. You've got to push them aside. You've got to be happy. I know you can't be happy all the time.
Definitely.
That's impossible. But for the majority of the time you should be. And just not let things get on top of you. You must never let things get on top of you. If you're in a job and the things are on top of you, you should get out of that job and find another one. You've got to be satisfied with what you're doing and how you're living.
I understand. This is the last question, so I'll give you a break after this. Considering the advancements in technology and the possibility of virtual reality, do you know what that is? Virtual reality.
Yeah.
You know, when most of the time people put on these big glasses on and they see the world in their technology. Yeah. How might our understanding of reality evolve in the future? How do you think that, virtual reality will change things?
I think it's going to be very difficult to understand reality in the future. It's like my life, everything have changed. You know, from little tiny planes to planes now that go faster than sound. You never dreamed of that when you was young, that you'd see that. You never dreamed that you'd see a racing car go over certain mileage per hour. You just can't look into the future. You might, in your own head, you might decide that this is going to happen or that's going to happen, but you don't know. Some people can sort of look forward, but others can't. And the trouble is that things change so quick now, don't they? You know, you had radio, and then you had television, and now you've got all those gadgets that you all play with, who thought of a mobile phone?
That's true.
Yeah. So what's it going to be like in the future when you contacting one another? Are you going to have a mobile phone, or are you going to have something else? And when you're traveling, you may not travel by train or by car, or you might travel by car and it's driving you, you're not driving it. And with the trains, they alter all the time, and the speed alters all the time. It's things happen so quick that 1 minute you're doing one thing and the next minute it's changed altogether and you're doing something else. It's a difficult thing really to think what might happen in the future.
It's quite crazy because, especially you mentioned that you've been living in the best times in the world. To some extent, I agree, because you've gotten to see the old world as it was,
Yes.
before like the great leap in technology, and you've also gotten to see mobile phones and movies on TV in your own house, and they're all colored and everything, and you don't have to go to the cinema and pay money to see one. You can just see it at
I
home.
can remember the first coloured film I seen was a pirate film with Errol Flynn in it. The Black Swan, it was called.
I see.
That's what his ship was called, a pirate ship.
Oh,
And it was about the pirates of the Caribbean.
I see.
But it's like I say, it's so difficult. It's the same with army weapons. Look at the weapons. In the old days, anti-tank gun, right? You had to put your feet on it and pull it to load it. And it was heavy as hell. And 9 times out of 10 you'd miss with it.
Really?
Now they got a thing, they just go boom, and it's gone.
So what do you mean by anti-tank guns? What kind of anti-tank guns? You mean like the portable ones, or you mean the big cannons?
No, this was portable, but you had to pull it up to get it into action.
Oh, okay. What kind of weapon was it?
It was a shoulder weapon, but it was
okay.
very, very heavy. Very heavy. It was like a bazooka.
I see.
But now look what they got now. It's like when they had bows and arrows, didn't they? And then all of a sudden, suddenly you had gunpowder.
That was quite a big deal.
Yeah. These are things that change your life completely. And I mean, it might come to a time when you don't have to work. They have robots doing it for you. Now, what kind of a life are you going to live then?
I'm not sure. I don't think I want to know.
Could you imagine being at home and a robot doing all the work? It will come. It'll come, and not in a too distant future. I think it will be. A lot of people will be out of work because of robots are doing it. They got some fancy robots now, mind, in Japan and that, for do different things. It would be nice to be able to look into the future and see what's happening.
That would be surely nice, yeah. So that's basically my 2 pages of questions answered.
I hope I've done all right for you.
Oh yeah, thank you so much.
It might be in the future that things will get that bad. They go back being primitive again.
Probably. I mean, it was this Einstein quote, or I cannot remember for the life of me who said it, that I don't know what World War III will be fought with, but I know that World War IV will be fought with sticks and stones.
Yeah, because World War III, I think, will wipe out most of the world.
It will just bring everything back to the same starting point.
Yeah, that's it. Because a nuclear war, you've seen what a nuclear bomb done in Japan. And imagine what these bombs they got now will do, And the thing is that they haven't got to send a plane up to do it, they can just fire it off. You see, if Hitler had listened to his generals, I wouldn't be here today, because they would have invaded Britain and conquered it. And
that would have been the end of the war, I think.
This country invented the rockets, not the Germans. You see some on display in the town, rockets.
Really?
In the town, yeah. John was showing them to me, and it was a Romanian who invented it.
Really?
And the Germans, I think they took the Romanians with them and perfected it into the ones they used to send to London. And they were getting to the point where they could send them even to America. But Hitler, he wanted to be the man telling what to do and what not to do. And he made all the mistakes. He made a mistake in Russia. He told his troops they had to fight and die. Instead of pulling them back and rearming them, and they were fighting in this type of clothing, summer clothing. They didn't have no
In
winter
winter,
clothing.
in the middle of winter.
Freezing to death, you know. And they also had places built underground where they built rockets and that, where nobody could see them, and where you couldn't bomb them because it was on like a sheer type of cliff thing, and you'd have to go with the plane in there and blow it up. It
reminds me, there were some British saboteurs that, I think they were Scottish, they started in Scotland and they were raiding some compounds in Norway where they were making heavy water like
That's right,
that,
yeah.
and they raided that, and that was basically how maybe the Germans would have ended up building the nuclear bomb before everyone else.
Yeah, they would have.
But those guys, they ended up raiding those places
There
and setting.
again, Hitler stopped them doing it. He didn't think it was, worth the time. And it was the same. He had a fighter plane that could go faster than any of ours.
Yeah, the Messerschmitt 262. I remember that. That was the jet plane, wasn't it?
And he stopped them manufacturing it. He didn't believe in jet planes. Didn't think they were any good. He stopped them manufacturing them. In the end, Britain had them. And he was an idiot. As far as war was concerned, he was still a Lance Corporal in the German army because he had no idea. He stopped Rommel. He wouldn't send the supplies to him. And he thought that they were going to stop the SAS easy, but they weren't. They were too clever for him. And that's why his orders went out then that if they were caught, they would want to be taken a prisoner as well. They were taken into wood, bullet in the back of the head. It's the future. I would hate to think what the future's going to bring. I really would. It's especially like we're talking about war.
Not something nice. Not nice at all.
Somebody's going to come up with something that's better than what anybody else have got. And then there's problems. And they'll want to go to war and beat everybody. War never got you anywhere really in the end, because whether you were the victor or the loser, you ended up, the losers more often than not ended up better off than the victors. You take Japan. They stopped Japan having an army and the Germans. So all that money they wasted on building up armaments and everything else, they turned to making cars and things like that.
Building the economy.
Yeah, built the economy right up. I mean, the roads that Hitler built, if he'd stayed sane, Germany would have been a really rich country, richer than rich, because he built all these roads, the autobahns, and things like that. And he looked after some of the people, like, not all of them, but he looked after some of them. He made that the Volkswagen, which is the people's car.
Yeah.
But he just got too ambitious, I think. He wouldn't listen to what he was being told.
Right. Well, I think this is a good time to wrap this up because I think we're going at almost 3 hours with the recording.
I hope it's worth it.
Well, thank you very much for
thank you.
taking the time to answer my questions because I think this will really help out a lot of people.
I thank you anyway for having a faith in it.
Yeah, you know, there's just so many stories to be told, and
Yeah.
I would love to be able to share them with other people as well.
Yeah, there's so many things you forget as well, you know, that happens in life. It's like when I used to go on holiday and you take photographs, instead of writing on the back where they were and what year they were, you just took them and that's it. I got 25 albums on of photographs from holidays.
Really?
But some of the places I can remember by looking at them, and others I don't know, because we didn't write on the back of them. And I got a lot of pictures. You know, you could buy the postcards advertising the place. I got a huge book full of those as well. And I got a lot of South African photographs and pictures. I know where they are because I had a family out there. But we went, when we was in America, they took us to, I wouldn't say it was a zoo, but there was different types of sheep and animals there. And one of them come, and he must have done something to Iris lost a watch in there. One of them must have done something, and she lost a watch. I had to buy her a new one.
Yeah.
And in Bristol they had a zoo, and they had a huge gorilla. Alfie, his name was.
Alfie.
Yeah, Alfred the Great, we used to call him. And when the air outside him went, he used to go berserk. He grabbed the rail in his end and rattle, and then he shoot across the floor, grab the others and start rattling. And one day there was a kiddie there with a ball close to him. He put his hand out and grabbed the ball, and they was giving him a banana to try and get the ball.
He was straining, wasn't he?
He was too clever for that. They weren't going to get it off him. Those were times what I enjoyed and all when I was young, going to the zoo and seeing all the different animals. I used to love going to see different animals and watching them. And you could go to these places where they had these birds of prey, and they were trained. They'd have this glove thing and a bird on there, and they'd have a bit of meat or something, and the bird. And then the bird would come down and swoop over your heads. And then they call you out to hold the bird. I used to like all that. That was some good times, really good times. Because I like animals, no matter what type they are. My favourite, I think, animal is the Bengal tiger.
Really?
Beautiful animal, beautiful. And the snow one, the snow leopard. They're two very beautiful animals, and they're becoming extinct because people are killing them. Killing the ones for their fur and killing the other ones because they go in and kill their chickens or whatever. Because now you've got man has advanced into their territory, haven't they?
Now they're forced to go after other foods.
And they're chopping the jungles down, you know. And those, what do you call apes, are orangutan ape.
Orangutan.
They are really comical. I see them in South Africa, and it started to rain, and when he got a box and put it on his head, You would think he'd have the sense to do that.
Oh my God, they're very smart. You could see them. One of them, they met. There was this video of this guy who was wearing this cool leather jacket,
Yeah.
and this chimpanzee came up to him and gently took off his leather jacket and put it onto himself, and he was wearing it perfectly and everything, and he was looking around very cool and he was very happy. I think he also put on some sunglasses. I'm not sure.
Another time I had a laugh was in Scotland in a zoo, and we was looking at the chimpanzees. There's a crowd of them watching, and the old chimpanzee was looking at them, and all of a sudden he put his hand between his legs, caught it, and threw it through the rail. It was hysterical. As if somebody caught that lot. They do some strange things, some of these animals. Well, I better let you get on with it, whatever you're going to do now.
Yeah, I think.